So welcome to Africa Glowing, and we hope you're enjoying the show already. I have a very special guest on today's show, and he's somebody I'm extremely delighted to meet. He is the first national vice president of the National Institute of Town Planners of Nigeria. He's also a consultant urban planner, and he had the pleasure of being a commissioner in Lagos State for physical plan and urban development between 2011 and 2015. I speak of no other person than Mr. Toyin Ayinde. Pleasure to have you on the show, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, I was saying that, I got a copy of your book just a couple of days ago, and it was a very interesting read. To put it down was a kind of a challenge for me, because obviously I have to do other things. But I want to start with a quote that you put in that book, and to say, you said, people are often quick to lay blame on others, but planning requires a network of processes requiring the contributors of all stakeholders.
Yeah, I think that must be one of the quotes I brought up when I was trying to discuss the importance of stakeholdership in planning. And many times people do not understand that it's not just about government, or those in government don't understand that it's not just about them. When you are planning or you are administering planning, you are doing it on behalf of a people, on behalf of a nation, on behalf of a community. And so their opinions do matter anytime you are undertaking that assignment. So that at the end of the day, what you have as a plan is reflecting the desires of the people themselves. And once it is their desire, they will be eager to fulfill their own desire.
I'll tell you why that struck me, is because it talks about inclusion.
Yes.
And it goes against the perception that, government this side of the world just wants to sit down and just do things on its own, and people are not being carried along. That's the impression you get almost every day, on a daily basis, that, okay, government is just doing this. But for you to have written the book and stick that out as a major, was what caught my interest, to say, what kind of man would put into the context, that we are talking about inclusion, and everybody, even to the poorest, lowest strata, is a stakeholder, and their perspective, their opinions is supposed to be sought before you start any project at all.
Yeah, the truth about government is that, let me use that word government, is that it is playing the role of leadership. And part of the description or definition of leadership is that if a man calls himself a leader and he looks back and he doesn't see anyone behind him, then he's taking a stroll. So it means that in this journey, because it's a journey, in the journey of government providing governance through leadership, it's an inclusive thing where the man on the street should feel concerned that somebody is taking care of him. That's the way I've been trained.
Which brings me to what I wanted to ask. So how did you get this narrative, this mindset? What was your upbringing like? How did you form this body of thought to be the philosophy that guides your life? Which is, if we may say, what people do not think is the norm when it comes to people who find themselves in governance.
I tell people that every previous stage that you pass through in life is a preparation for a later stage that you arrive at. First, I started being a child of strict Christian parents. You have to go to church, go to Sunday school, memorize verses of the Bible and things like that. My dad was a stickler for getting his children into Christian schools. So when I left Lagos, I started my primary school in Lagos in 1965, because I went to the Apostolic Church Primary School. in October 65, my dad had already been transferred to Kaduna. So and I was to go and meet him and my mom in January 1966. So before I got to Kaduna, he was already looking for a Christian primary school. And so he got me into the Baptist Day School in Kaduna. By the time I finished Baptist Day School, the secondary school that we were looking for also was a Christian one. Well, what all of this did was to lay some foundational principles on how to relate with people, on how to dwell together. In my secondary school, for instance, when you get into my school, the first thing you see is the signboard or the signpost that reads Psalm 133, verse 1. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. So that has laid a kind of foundation for me on how to relate with other people. And then I cannot now grow up
and depart from
all of that.
So where did the passion for urban and regional planning, come into the mix? I mean,
Let me say that I was inspired by my father. Okay. God rest his soul. Was very good in some of this artwork. I grew up to know him as someone who studied mechanical engineering, and he was good in engineering drawings. And then I don't know if you met this thing they called address. If people were to go on transfer, so the speech you want to read to them, they will write it in calligraphy, handwriting, and they will glaze it. He used to do that, and I loved seeing him do that. But by 1975, as I was leaving secondary school, this man had enrolled 3 years before into Kaduna Polytechnic and studied quantity surveying, which was a construction industry profession. So by the time I was looking for what course to study, he was one that was advising, you can do either planning or you do estate management. That's how
I came into
the profession.
If you're just joining us, we are on Africa Glowing, and we have a fantastic guest in the house. Mr. Toyin Ayinde is a seasoned town planner and somebody who is involved in urban and regional planning. We'll take a short break now and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa Glowing, where we have conversation that inspires Africa to greatness and to do wonderful things. I have a great guest in the show. If you're just joining in, we've been talking with Mr. Toyin Ayinde, who, for lack of a better word, I can just sum it up, was former commissioner during the Fashola era, being the commissioner for physical planning and urban development. Yes, so we were saying that obviously your dad had influenced yes. You because he's a very professional person. Based on the little I've read of you, you're very passionate about. So your dad kind of sold that vision of quantity surveying and all that entire.
No, he wasn't quantity surveying. He sold the idea of planning. Yeah, that I could either do planning or estate management.
And you picked the other.
I chose planning.
So how has the journey been for you so far, if we can ask you?
Well, I like quoting John Maxwell in one of his books. He said, if you do not get what you want what you get. But for me, I think I got what I wanted. And then, the Bible says that whatever our hands find to do,
we do it diligently.
We do it diligently. And then Proverbs 22:29 plays out eventually. Do you see a man who is diligent in his duties? He will stand before kings and not before obscure men.
So you obviously stood before kings.
So that eventually played out. The first time I learned about that verse was in 1972 when I was in Form 2. And I was barely 13. I was going to 13 years old. I was a teacher on teaching practice who was in our school, but it was his time to lead the devotion. And he said, Proverbs 22:29 Seest thou a man diligent in his duty? He will stand before the kings and not before obscure men. So I learned to put some energy in whatever I was doing. And through some other trainings I've had over the years, there are those years that we'll hear of winning ways, conferences by Pastor Matthew, and we'll dash there and go and listen. And I remember listening to some speakers that will say, okay, just don't give what is expected of you, do it and some more, do it and some more. So all those things had stuck in my head in the way I would do things. And eventually it got me standing before the king himself.
Obviously. I like to take a quote from your book that kind of caught my attention. I said, when people are involved in the process of decision making that affects their lives, they usually take ownership of the outcome of such decisions and consequently commit to ensuring that the decisions are carried through. Now, so for me, I mean, that just talks about how it's important for everybody who sees a stake in this issue to be in that connect.
Yes.
So the question I want to ask is this: why is it that we don't see Christians with a mentality that we have a stake in Nigeria, we have a stake in Africa, and we need to get involved in governance?
Well, I think is a misunderstanding of the concept of politics. If I use governance, it will be too general.
Yes.
It's a misconception of the way we see politics. I come from the background of the Apostolic Church. Mm-hmm. And when I used to fellowship there, they will even make it loud and clear. Don't go there because they kill people there. Mm. Because all we have seen truly, as a child, I saw thugs carry bottles and break them and things like that. Who wants to go into a situation like that? So I think the Christian fold had labeled politics as
a dirty game.
A dirty game. It's bad and we shouldn't be bad. Unknown to us that once the good people leave it, they will be left with the bad people, and then obviously they will be the ones to get into the government, and then you will now start praying that God should change their hearts. He's not about to change their hearts. Mm-hmm. So I think we just lost, we just misconceived that idea, not knowing that we could really be there and try to make impact and try to say one or two things. The thing about politics is that I think the average politician is threatened by the other person because he thinks you're in competition with him. He thinks you want to take that position, so he's in a struggle with you. But if, on the other hand, you are there to advise him, he likes the person who advises him, the person who is not in competition. And one day you can just say, hey, why don't you come and help us do
what we're doing?
So I think the syllabus in the church must change. We need to start letting our people know that if you leave it to those you say are bad, then we can only produce bad government. I tell people that as we're seated here, if a leader is going to be chosen, he will be one of us. Mm-hmm. So the question is, now when you have been chosen to lead, what will make you better than what you were
prior to
that? Is there any training to make you a leader? If there was no training, you will probably be operating with the mentality that you had while we were here. And I think that's where the church needs to come in to feel part of the stakeholders, because at the end of the day it affects us. Part of the stakeholders. Let's even train our people to understand the terrain of politics. Even if they don't have offices, let's train them to understand the terrain so they can write articles, they can make comments, they can mobilize people. People power is a great power. Mm-hmm. And on your own, you can be mobilizing people. The man who is able to mobilize people, he's the real leader, not the man in office. Because at the end of the day, he will find out that, oh, I'm just holding this position.
The power is actually somewhere else.
So
Yeah, and that's the whole idea. If you're just joining in, this is Africa Glowing, and we're having a fantastic conversation with Mr. Toyin Ayinde in the house. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll be talking some more. Don't go away. Welcome if you're just joining us. This is Africa Glowing, where we have conversations that inspire Africa. And we're always looking forward to bringing guests that can inspire you to believe that this continent and this country indeed can be all that God has created her to be. And today we've been talking to a seasoned town planner, somebody who's been in the space of, planning and development and looking at infrastructure and things like that has to do with governance and ensuring that everything is well planned. And he's also had the privilege of being a commissioner in Lagos State in Nigeria. Mr. Toyin Ayinde, so we were talking about being involved and understanding that the people is where the power is. So walk us through your own journey of actually being a commissioner in Lagos. And how was that 4 years for you?
For me, it was a privilege being in government. I saw it as service. And that stems from the training I had at the Daystar Leadership Academy 2002 and 2003. Then anyone would ask, why are you training in leadership? Is anything in the offing? But like I tell people, that's the way it works. 8 years after, I get to be invited to serve in government. So I went there with humility. I saw that you could actually have paraphernalia of office, beginning with police escort and things like that. That was the first form that we had to fill to say how many police escorts you needed as a commissioner. And something in me just said, fold that form and put it in your pocket. So I didn't submit the form. And I just said to myself, if God is no longer in the business of protection, then he can leave me alone. Because I didn't think that my protection lay in the hands of any policeman. So I had it running like that. And because it's also service, I reckon that a servant is not superior to his master. So I probably was one of the very few commissioners who threw their doors open every day to receive members of the public. Except on Mondays when we went for executive council meetings. There was no day I didn't receive people. And I picked my calls. Throughout my 4 years, I didn't switch off my phones except I was in an aircraft. Because number one, the governor himself might be calling, or a citizen might be calling. You don't know when there are dangers. I was in Oshogbo in October 2011 when I was called that there was a collapse in Lagos. Immediately I took off for Lagos. So it was a life dedicated to service because I had learned that it was service. I think for me, it was a way to demonstrate that you can demystify some offices. So there are times I will walk into my officer's domain. I will go into their offices unannounced. And some of them will jump up and say, hey, relax. I just wanted to find out the progress of things like that, So, and it also helped me to see the way civil service works. Most of us out there think that nothing really happens in the civil service. Truth is, a lot happens. And as you have people who you think are indolent in the service, there are also people who are very diligent in the service. And I'm looking forward to a day that Nigeria will be able to blend the experience and the resources of civil service to the speed and innovation of the private sector. That will bring a lot of progress to our nation. Because what I found out was that I came in with the private sector spirit. And I had a philosophy, no fire slept on my table. So every day I'll clear my files. If I don't, I take them home. By the time I'm coming tomorrow morning, done. So, which is not what we see all the time.
Did the people who are working with you find that difficult to cope with?
Initially,
because they are used to having files on the table.
Initially, I actually had an occasion when someone came into me and said that some people weren't feeling happy, and I wanted to know why. And they said they didn't get as many patronage as they used to get. The patronage was that they were used to files mounting up, and then people would come and say, please, I have a file in the commissioner's office. Can you help me bring it up so that the commissioner will treat it in good time? So the complaint was that I was turning out the speed at which I was turning out the files was too high.
So you needed to slow it down a little
Yeah,
bit.
because there was no need for anybody to go and ask for his file. Everything was already done. So initially they found it difficult, but I think they learnt my style and they went with it.
So looking at this backdrop and looking at what you said, demystifying that entire thing, what roles do you think, as Christians, we need to begin to play right now, the way things are?
I think we must begin to train our people. We'll begin to train Christians for governance. There's something that has been bothering me in Nigeria, and I think Christians also may be contributing, because like somebody said, when you hear about a crime today in Nigeria, the person can be Julius, the person can be Peter, that means he's a Christian. It can be Hausa, it can be Yoruba, so it cuts across everybody. But we can use our own platform to begin to teach people to do things right. I see Nigeria as a nation that has always been talking about sharing. You talk of revenue sharing, you talk of resource control, because everybody is always looking at what to get. I have not seen us seriously have conversations on what to contribute. So, someone from the northwestern zone says they are not sharing the resources to us very well. Somebody from the south says, oh, they are taking so much from the ground and they are not sharing us very well. We have not asked ourselves, okay, so what should we expect Northwest to bring to the Commonwealth? What should Northeast bring? What should South bring? Let's contribute. Because we are not increasing our Commonwealth, but our population is increasing. So we have less cake
and more mouths to feed.
So Christians must begin to, the church must begin to teach Christians to be innovative, to be productive, not to get to office and do as it's being done. I've seen people in office and they are so arrogant. Some years ago in Lagos State, there was a commissioner who, when he's about to get into the elevator to his office, if any other person was there, they would have to come down for him. That's arrogance. So, if Christians must go into government, they must be the ones demonstrating humility.
And leadership.
They must be the ones demonstrating diligence, demonstrating prudence, so that it serves as an example unto
which
other
exactly
people.
is what Christ has sent us to do. So your book, Service with a Difference.
Yes.
Yeah. What inspired that entire thought?
When we were in government, our class captain then, Babatunde Raji Fashola, the governor, always advised that we should try to document our experiences. And while I was in office, I tried to do some jottings in terms of titles of chapters, not really writing. Then I found out that I had a lot of assignments. I just couldn't sit down to write this when I was in office. And then, but before I left office, I think I was able to get topics for just about 12 chapters. So it was when I left and I had room to reflect that I got many more things to write about, and the resources are there. And I can tell you that just like John was saying as he was closing the Gospel of John, that if everything that Jesus did was
documented, all the books in the world.
So if right now I'm asked to write another volume, I will surely do.
Conveniently.
I will surely do, because there are a lot of things to explain. When you do some things and it's not the common way, people are wondering, why did you do it? It's one of the reasons I wrote this. I have people who are still struggling to be friendly with me today just because I swapped their positions. And they had been there for quite a number of times. They see those positions as privileged. Then I come in and ask, must someone be in a privileged position forever? How about the other man who has never been? And I say, you know what? In life, you rotate. Life is in seasons. There's rain, there's dry season, there's autumn, there's winter, there's summer. So why don't we rotate? So one day you will be in the desert, be calm. Life is in seasons. Another day we will rotate. You will be in the flourishing land. So, but some people had thought that it had become a birthright. So I tinkered with it. So as far as they were concerned, I rocked the boat. But for me, I was doing what was right.
In today's palace, we say you shook the table.
Yes, yes. So those are some of the things that that I did. I also did some innovations. For example, if you hear of pre-screening of applications today, I introduced it. I introduced one of the processes that has now been legalized. It has been put in the regulation, and it's called the pre-screening of documents. You know, when I was a consultant, the very last project, before that very last project, I had processed one 6-floor application for 5 years. And I thought that was not normal. That was, in fact, it was the lowest performance of planning. So when I had a project that I had to do before I became a commissioner, I just did an experiment trying to pass those drawings through the eyes of the officers that will process them eventually. And I got those that were defective to be corrected. By the time we submitted, after the screening, within a month, I got the approval. So it gave me the leverage to be able to introduce that as a process. So before I left government, if any drawing was pre-screened and you turn it in, maximum of 6 weeks, you get your approval. And even for projects that have to get to the governor, 15 floors, beyond now, we processed in 3 months, 4 months. Things that used to take 6, 7 years before. So I was able to achieve that.
In a very short time.
Yes.
So what do you really hope that people who read your book will take away from it?
I believe that anyone who reads this, if he has not been in government before, will give him a heart of governance in the right way. If anyone is in government now and reads this, it may help him to change. Because I must tell you, when they say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, it's because seats of authority are tempting. You have a lot of things you can. There are some things you will do and nobody will really ask you. Our system doesn't ask questions. That's the challenge. Our system doesn't ask questions. So you can actually do a number of things and nobody will ask you. People put police escort in their cars and drive one way. They drive against the traffic because they're in power. People drive and they want people to leave the road for them. I used to tell my driver, you can't be honking that people should leave the road for. Everybody has a right
to be on the road.
To be on the road. How about you could do that? I've been in church before, and I drove myself, and one of the ushers was going to prevent me. Apparently, she didn't know. And I said, there's always a space for me where I'm going. So I think I had to introduce myself. I said, I'm commissioner for this. So as we were leaving, I didn't know that she said anything. She allowed me. It was later I saw that my wife walked back to her. So I was asking, what's the problem? She said, Commissioner, my foot. You know, so I said, well, you didn't need to go and meet her. It only means that she can never become a commissioner. Because, you know, what I want to say is that later I had some pastors come to approach me to say I shouldn't be annoyed. I said, I'm not annoyed. And they told the lady that, oh, is it because he didn't come with police escort? Is it because if he had a police escort, of course, if I had a police escort, she would not even have the courage to even stop the vehicle. But I'm trying to say that you may be a governor. You must never forget that you are first a human being. You are first a citizen of that state. You are a servant of all those people because you are holding that office on their behalf. It's in trust. So one of those things that used to occur to me is that, hey, you are holding this thing in trust. And I used to tell people that I was brought here to come and serve. If I do not want to serve, I should go back home. So I think anybody who reads this will have a new paradigm about what service is, what leadership is. It doesn't make you superior to those you lead. It just makes you humbled to know that it's a privilege to be in that position.
I think you need to organize a master class for a lot of Christians who find themselves in leadership, even in the private sector, public sector, so that we can really lead and follow the examples that are really loud, because obviously this is what Christ sent out here to emulate, so that we can impact the world and know that we can serve as leaders, and we can, our job basically is to serve and to protect people and to be able to show an example. So on the home front, so how has family life been? Have you been able to balance both, raising children at this point, and marriage, and the challenges of being a commissioner and all that? How was that 4 years for you?
Well, I tell people that I'm a bit privileged, fortunate, blessed that when I became a commissioner, my children were already grown up.
Oh, okay.
But the good thing about our relationship is that all of my children found me bathing them. So we were already friends from their childhood. I think my first son is the one I started bathing for late, maybe about 3 months after he was born. But other children, maximum 2 weeks, I started bathing them. And we change their nappies, we dress up for them, take them to school, such that anytime I'm going out and I say I'm going out, the first question is, Daddy, when will you come back? If you are not a good daddy, your children won't ask you. So I had that relationship with them. I never missed their open days. And even when I was a commissioner, I took them to their universities myself. And we would go there and visit them once in a while. So we had that relationship. My wife, superwoman, she's a civil servant. Okay. She's not a permanent secretary. But, ironically, I used to wonder, what's wrong with this lady? She will bring files and bags of files to treat at home. I said, didn't you work in the office and all of these things? It was when I started dealing with files that I understood.
And I understood when you are now bringing your own files.
Yes, but she was really supportive. The whole of the family was supportive. And I gave my children a directive. I asked them never to introduce themselves to anyone as the child of a commissioner. Because the commissioner was just an office, and Toyin Ayinde remains Toyin Ayinde. I recollect an occasion when one of the permanent secretaries then, my wife was a director by the time I became a commissioner. One of the permanent secretaries had been meeting my wife on a particular forum. They were on a particular commission together as members. And she just knew her as Mrs. Ayinde. Mrs. Ayinde. Until we went for a wedding reception, and as we were going, she saw me, and she saw my wife with me. She now said, Mrs. Ayinde. She now said, that's my husband. She said, Mrs. Ayinde, I share you. You mean your husband is coming?
And you never said anything all this while?
That's the real spirit that should go with it. So, what's fantastic being a commissioner is a servant's job. That's what I tell people. You are a steward. And when you are a steward, please do it diligently, like Professor Jerry Gana used to say in those days of MAMSA, the mobilization agency. Yeah. He said, if you are a servant, serve well. Yeah. If you are a commander-in-chief, chiefly command well.
Chiefly command
so if
well.
you are a commissioner, you should be a commissioner very well. And you can only do it very well when you truly serve the people in humility and solve their problems. That's the essence.
Can you tell us one experience you had when you were a commissioner that you will never forget, that was like very, 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 life changing for you, in terms of one experience you had that you will never forget while you were in service?
Okay, let me there are a lot of things, but let me talk about an issue that was on many years before I became a commissioner. It was a land dispute.
Okay.
And this thing was on until I became a commissioner. So when the issue came up and I saw the fire, I said, okay, invite the parties. Let me meet with them. So one of the parties was represented by his lawyer. And then they had the people of the community, and then they had the local government. The local government chairman was a cousin of mine. And he was on the opposite side to the other man. And after I had listened to everything, I now began to analyze the situation one by one, and I told the local government and the community that they were wrong, that this is the man that was actually right. Don't forget, I said the local government chairman
was your cousin.
My cousin. And they agreed because of the way I analyzed everything from the roots. And I said, if somebody had told you this at a particular time, maybe we wouldn't get here. So I resolved the issue. The following day, I didn't know the position of the man who was represented by his lawyer. I didn't know he was chairman of the Civil Service Commission of Lagos State. The following day, he came to my office. He said his lawyer told him how the meeting went. And then he said he wanted to see that commissioner who resolved the matter. So that's how he came to my office very early in the morning. And he said, Honorable Commissioner, he said, you are the fourth commissioner handling this issue. But you are the first to tell the truth on this matter. And for me, that was a remarkable statement. So other people had been on this case before, but they either lacked the courage to say what was right, or they lacked the depth to analyze issues and then take the right decisions. So for me, it's one of those things I'll never forget. I think I documented it. I can put it in the book.
So as a closing shot, what is that message you would like to pass? Normally we talk about not just to the coming generation, but even to us now, about how we can ensure that this country and this entire continent can rise up and to live to its full potential, because we definitely know that Africa is blessed, but it's a far cry right now from what we know she can be with all her potentials.
You know, I closed the book with a chapter I called Better Days Are Ahead. And it's because I believe that no matter how far gone we are into the bush, if we discover that it's the wrong path, then we need to retrace our steps. So I believe that we have to revisit our foundation. One of those things I advocate is re-education. Nigeria must invest again in education. And when I say education, my own view is that government doesn't need to do much. All government needs to do is concentrate on primary education. Because the primary education is the foundational structure for education. In those days, even in the days of Awolowo, it was only primary education that was free, but it was also quality education. At age 6, or going to age 6 in what was called Infant 1 then in 1965, it wasn't even primary 1, because it was after Infant 1, Infant 2 in Lagos that you now start standards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I was in Infant 1 at age 5 plus. And before, it was also a January to December academic session. But at Infant 1, I could read my Bible. Although in Yoruba, because we were taught with our mother language from the beginning. But at age 1, at the family devotion, as they are reading, once it gets to my turn, I will get up and read my own. And that was at age 6. At age 6, I wrote a letter to my father who was in Kaduna. I didn't own the words. My grandmother was dictating the words, but I was writing. So I learned how to write in Infant 1. Let's assume it's primary 1. In primary 1, we were taught value of life, because there was that poem in Yoruba. It would say, "Yes, eresi apakon. Ma se te kokoro ni kokoro ti iwo ko le da, Ọlọ́run ló lè dá." That is for those who don't understand Yoruba. Don't step on that ant. That ant that you seem to ignore, because as you cannot create it, but it's God who created it. So we were taught the value of preserving life, not even a human being's life. So if the life of an insect
It's so valuable.
was valuable to us, then how won't the life of a human being be valuable? So, but does it not look odd that in that same country that taught us not to step on insects, so somebody can just shoot another person? And so that's why I think we should just go back to our primary education. In those days, all people had was primary education, but it was sufficient to kindle a thirst for higher education. So in those days, we had exam success. It was correspondence. People knew enough to apply by themselves to sit for correspondence exams. They would pass their WAEC. Chief Obafemi Awolowo's first degree in commerce was correspondence. So a lot of things we can achieve. Just let's ensure that the basic primary is so strong that it will create that you will be the one that know that I deserve more than this.
Mr. Ayinde, I wish you could continue this conversation for so long, but we have to go. Thank you so much for not just such an awesome book that you've written, but again the knowledge you've shared, and which I still believe many of us still have to continue learning for. So we're looking forward to having you again on the show, and I hope you oblige us when we call you again.
I will.
All right.
Once they're still alive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir,
yes,
for coming. So viewers, there you have it. I've had the privilege of spending the past almost 1 hour talking to this very fantastic son of Africa, someone who is just so passionate about ensuring that we build a better continent. My name is Deji-irawo. It's been a pleasure being here with you on Africa Glowing, and just want to tell you to ensure that you join us again for our next episode of Africa Glowing, where we'll be bringing to you another wonderful son of Nigeria, daughter of Africa, and letting you know that we continue to have conversations that inspire Africa. Goodbye.
Hi there! Like what you just saw? You can be part of this as an individual or organization. For sponsorship and advert placement, X2D Safe Entertainment.